Hi, I'm Ria Pierre and I just quit an insane summer job. From having to call poison control on my first week to office romance and the smell of poop, this job was so absurd and chaotic that I couldn't rest until I made this video. Let's talk about it. Today, I'm going to be working on art inspired by fish at a local pet store in North Carolina, so I hope you enjoy. I worked this summer at a science camp for kids aged 5 to 13 as a camp manager, which sounds really awesome, right? Like little kids learning about science. Yay! The job was advertised as a bunch of spreadsheets and making schedules sprinkled in with some nice time with some kids, which I actually thought would be awesome. However, summer camp is actually one of the most insane things ever, and it turns out that's common knowledge in America. But no one thought to tell the little British girl that. So I signed up with absolute enthusiasm, thinking that camp was everyone holding hands and embodying the true middle-aged Facebook mum motto, live, laugh, love. I did not live, laugh, love. By the way, check out my support squishies. I recently got into squishies, so expect to see a new one every week as I rekindle my inner child after this experience. The first moment I should have known this was a wackadoodle job was when I saw my office. My office was essentially at the top of some stairs in an open space that happened to be encased by 2 bathrooms. It was an open concept, if you will. I've even drawn it out for reference. The bathrooms I was encased between were the only bathrooms that we could use for the hundreds of kids who came through camp each week. You know what that meant? It meant that every day I was encased in the smell of pee-pee and poo-poo anytime one of the kids went to the bathroom, which they did, often. And that should have been my first sign. But Mama raised no quitter, okay? I mean, she technically did, but not until God's silliest soldier endured God's silliest battles first. In the first week, we had a toddler camp that used Epsom salts for a science experiment. You know Epsom salts, they usually go into the bathtub when your muscles hurt. Well, during this experiment, the counselor yelled out to the class, by the way, do not eat the Epsom salts, which would have worked in any other scenario. Except, if you've ever interacted with toddlers, you'll know that they are incarnations of chaos. When a toddler hears a sentence, they usually only process the last few words. So this kid heard, eat the Epsom salts. And in his defense, the word salt is in the name. Anyway, after the kid ate the salts, his counselor started to panic, like really panicked, and she ran him over to my office. So picture this, I'm sitting in my quiet office, and I hear the sound of a toddler crying and an adult yelling, getting louder and louder. And the poor kid was really scared. So I sat down with him and I spoke to him and reassured him that everything was okay. And it actually took a lot of convincing, like Olympic levels of gymnastics to reassure him that he was okay. I mean, he's only 5, but good news for us. I'm like a toddler whisperer. I really adore kids and I think that they are so much more intelligent than we realize. So just as the tears stopped, one of my coworkers came over and asked what was going on. Nothing much, I said. Just some Epsom salts, I said. And this coworker proceeds to enter another panic and he starts yelling, we have to call poison control right now. Boom. The kid started crying again. And girl, I wanted to cry too. And as a side note, it is completely Googleable whether it's okay to consume Epsom salts. Based on the kid's size and the amount he consumed, he was going to be fine. He was fine. Look, I like to navigate this world with my mouth, okay? It's true. As a kid, you wouldn't imagine the things I tried to eat. Honestly, as an adult too. My sister and I were both kind of crazy. One time my sister had a rock stuck in her nose for a week before anyone realized, but that's another story. Anyway. So, as my coworker started to panic, poison control essentially said, it's fine, he's just gonna poop a bit. Because guys, Epsom salts are actually a laxative. And no, this is not medical advice. Do not eat them because you need to poop. But do you remember what I said about the fact that I was encased between 2 bathrooms? Yeah. But understand this too. The whole situation from top to finish was really blown out of proportion by everyone but the kid, who was totally valid in his response. So this wasn't why I quit, and I just want to say he was a really awesome kid. He was very brave, braver than all of us, and he ended up having the best week of camp afterwards. I personally made sure of it. But you know who didn't have a good week? Ants. So, one of our camps is bug and wilderness themed, and one of our counselors was a biology and philosophy major. He was actually pretty cool, and he combined ethics with biology to come up with a cool activity where the kids got to look at ants under a microscope. If the idea of looking so close to an ant that you can basically taste it does not sound appetizing, now is a really good time to look away from the screen as I show you the ant under the microscope in 3, 2, 1. Well, what we would do is we would find ants that had already passed away, which is really easy to do. I mean, try it. I dare you to find an ant in the next 24 hours. Unless you live on a cruise ship, it really won't be too hard. Well, one of the counselors did not get the memo about the ants, so she came into office one day with a pastry dish and she was shaking it back and forth like a bartender with a nice crisp alcoholic bev, except this was not a bev. This was a living creature. Do you know how valuable ants are to our society? So she gained a reputation for being a little bit intense, which, oh my god, you guys, this reminds me of a story I wasn't even planning to tell. Okay, I'm going to need you to sit down for this. You won't believe me until you hear it, but this story involves Jeff Bezos in real life. Okay, so at the end of the day, we had this thing called pickup, where parents would join a line in their cars to pick up their kids. One particular day, it was very hot outside. I'm running pickup and someone runs over to me like, a bird, a bird. And bear in mind, it's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. There was a tiny bird with no feathers and its eyes shut on the ground. I've never had to rehabilitate a bird or anything like that. I rescued my kitten when he was very, very small, like a few weeks small. But a bird is something else entirely, especially as they're wildlife. We at least figured out that we should put the bird in something that mimics a nest. So I sent someone to grab a box and we figured we could replicate the nest experience so that we could find a rescue or something. Except literally no rescue in the area was picking up. They were all shut, which is so crazy to me. But I can see also how rescues are probably not getting a lot of funding right now. So whatever. We brought the bird inside so that we could keep it a bit cooler, which I'm also not even sure if you're meant to do. But I was so upset about the situation that I burst out into tears in front of everyone. And it was so embarrassing. But to make matters worse, someone who worked nearby in the building, let's call her Bezos lady, which will make sense in a second, came up to me and slapped a piece of paper on my shoulder and walked off. I don't know how to describe it other than she literally had the sheet of paper and she slapped it on the side of my shoulder and then just walked away. So I look at the paper and it said something along the lines of, unless a bird is featherless or not opening its eyes, leave it outside. Here's the thing. The bird was featherless and it was not opening its eyes. So I'm trying to read this paper through my tears and this random asshole just handed me an unhelpful passive-aggressive sheet of paper instead of just talking to me. But fun fact about that woman, she actually went to Jeff Bezos' wedding. I guess her husband was like friends with Jeff Bezos when they were all in college or something. So yeah, I assume that someone who goes to a billionaire wedding isn't prone to caring about wildlife. That's probably not a hot take. Anyway, this experience was actually really transformative and insane for me. I can't believe I almost didn't tell it. Because since that moment, and since seeing that bird, I started to ask myself if I can truly claim to be a lover of animals and cry over one if I eat them. So, since that happened a few months ago, I've actually turned pescatarian. And believe it or not, this also isn't why I quit, but it did contribute. Also, talking about fish and pescatarianism, I also got to look at a bunch of fish that also ethically passed away under a microscope at work too. See the pictures. And while I'm trying to save these animals, animals were also attacking us. Do you remember the first time you were stung by a bee or any sort of insect? Feel free to tell me in the comments, because I don't. I don't even think I've been stung before. But one of the kids at camp cannot say the same thing, for he was stung by a bee on his head. It was a crazy experience. A kid came into the office really upset, and he explained through his tears that he was stung on his head and he needed immediate surgery. So we scrubbed up, and indeed, the bee stinger was still in his head when we got it out. It was so unsettling. In fact, I'm so unsettled by that experience that I kind of don't want to tell you anymore, other than that I humbly request that it never be brought up again. If you comment anything to do with the bee, I might have to bite you. By the way, in terms of the art I'm working on right now, it's inspired by two things. The first are those scientific posters you see from time to time that outline the name of animals with Latin descriptors. The second is the art of an insanely talented artist on Rednote, whose ID I will tag below. And before I tell you why I quit, I have to tell you about the office romance, okay? Like all good stories, it isn't complete until there's a bit of love in the air. Well, one day at camp, one of the counselors came up to me in my office to tell me about a vibe she was picking up. Not between her and I, by the way. I just realized how confusing that sounded. No. You guys, I'm married. That's actually why she came to me. She wanted advice from someone with experience. Dating is completely fine in the context of the camp, by the way, as the summer job is entirely temporary and generally relaxed. Too relaxed, as you can probably tell. Well, she had a crush on one of our counselors, and truth be told, I wasn't sure if he liked her too. He was kind of hard to read, so she kept doing things to see if he liked her. And it turns out this whole time, he was doing the same thing. He was doing small things like making her tea or staying close to her to see if she liked him. And like any true male lead of a romance story, he came forward and he confessed his feelings to her. But before you get excited, you should know that it actually ended up not working out, mostly due to insane differences in political and personal values between the two of them. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, you're probably wondering why I quit. Well, I'll stop edging you now. While I had a lot of fun and crazy things did happen at camp, I also want to add that as a manager, I also had a manager above me who I thought would help a lot more than he did. Like, he was responsible for me, you'd think. Every week at camp was a lot of work, and there was no way I could truly give you a sense of how intense it was. And bear in mind, I was on like $14 an hour. So every time I got paid, I low-key felt disappointed. I had to call hundreds of parents a week, look over 150 kids, 150 different kids every week, and 20 counselors. I also had to be on call and ready to react to things instantly. And I barely knew what camp was when I started. Near the end, I started to realize that my boss was kind of taking advantage of me and giving me more work than I was actually meant to be handling. I felt that he used my naivety and eagerness, which is a lesson learned for me. But the reason I actually quit was kind of silly, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it. I was dealing with a parent inquiry over the phone where a parent had signed their kid up to camp but realized they needed a refund, which I totally get. The camp is about $600 for a week, which makes my salary even more laughable, by the way, but I digress. While I was on call with the parent, they were explaining that their son is autistic and would probably struggle with camp. And at first, I wanted to encourage them that it would be fine. I'm neurodivergent too. I also have really bad anxiety, and as a kid, I would have also struggled with a camp. So I was trying to reassure this parent and telling him that we have really good people working here, that a lot of our staff are neurodivergent. And while I'm having this conversation, one of my coworkers starts laughing and scoffing at me. And I remember just sitting there thinking, are you freaking serious? Because this parent is clearly upset. Heck, I'm upset. They're worried about their child. I'm trying to have a serious conversation with them. I'm putting my feelings on the line and I'm being incredibly honest with them about whether their kid is going to be safe and comfortable at camp. And someone is literally sitting there laughing at me for trying to reassure them. So I just snapped. It was the fact that I'd spent the entire summer running around trying to keep this place functioning, putting out fires, being underpaid, being overworked, smelling poop, and feeling like I was responsible for everything. And there's no scenario where it's okay for someone to laugh at you while you're trying to do your job. So I was just so angry. I still kind of am. So while I was mid-phone call, I slammed my laptop shut, went outside to take the call, and came back to the office and told everyone I was leaving and I was done. And I didn't have an explosive fuck you guys moment, you know, where I storm out and I flip everyone off. But I was just so mad. I was almost in tears. And I tried to stay professional at the same time, but the whole office just went quiet and the vibes got really bad. And after it all happened, I messaged my manager to let him know the series of events, and he told me he'd call me tomorrow so we could talk about it all and figure it out. So I figure, okay, that sounds good. And at this stage, I had hoped that it would all be resolved and that I could just unquit. Well, literally overnight, I started to get physically unwell too. I ended up having the worst cold ever this week, which also felt like the universe telling me to just stay home. So I call my manager while sick and he laughs off the whole situation. He tells me to come in anyway. And I told him that even if I felt comfortable with the situation, that I felt too sick to come in. And he hit me with, well, if I was in your shoes, I'd still come in. Yeah, you would, because my shoes was doing the work of his shoes or fucking whatever. And the thing is, I actually spoke to the coworker who laughed at me, and she explained that it was a misunderstanding, it was incredibly apologetic and kind, but at this point, between her and my manager, I was so angry on so many fronts that I could just not come back in. I didn't even want to show my face after crashing out, because then I would have to go through awkward small talk. So, just like the kids who came to camp, I did have an amazing time, and I am grateful for the experience. But at the same time, even if you like a job, sometimes you have to acknowledge that being mistreated or burning out or being pushed to work hard to make someone else look good is not healthy. So I quit my crazy summer job, but I'm glad I did, and I'm proud of myself for putting a boundary in the end. Now the summer is almost over, I can tell you one concrete truth. I will never work a summer camp again. Ever. Thank you all so much for getting to the end of this video. I'm planning to begin posting weekly again, and I'm so sorry that I stopped. As you can tell, I had my hands tied with poison control, bee stingers, and poop. I ended up gifting these stickers and posters to the people who work at my local fish store, and they loved it. One of them even hugged me. So some good came from this video, and thus my insane job. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and see me next week. Love you!